My neighbors and my friends, standing firm together against oppression, holding hands. It doesn't matter where you're from, or if you're young or woman or man. We're here for the same reason, we want to take back our land. Oh God, thank you for giving us the strength to hold on. And now we're here together, calling you for freedom, freedom. We know you can hear our call. Oh, we're calling for freedom, fighting for freedom. We know you won't let us fall. We know you're here with us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome to the special focus. I am Zahid Jadwat and we are together right up until 8 p.m. this evening, right here on Salam Media, of course, via our live stream on salammedia.com/listen-live on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page, as well as live on Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Now, the 270 billion rand tourism industry of South Africa is reeling and counting the cost of the COVID-19 pandemic, much like the rest of the world, with an estimated 68 billion rand in revenue amid the coronavirus outbreak having been lost. Government says that around 400,000 people in the industry could lose their jobs as a result of the tight restrictions on travel, which were in place in order to curb the spread of the coronavirus while the country went on a nationwide lockdown. Although restrictions are being eased, it could take years for the once promising industry to recover. So tonight we speak to members of the tourism industry and experts in that field to find out what exactly has been the impact of the pandemic, the lessons that could be learned, and of course, the way towards rebuilding the industry that many small rural communities have depended on. Get in touch with us. You know how to do that. You can send us a WhatsApp text message to the number 061 766 0355. Let me just repeat that number. It's 061 766 0355. Alternatively, you can tweet and you can tag at Salam Media. Please don't forget to use the hashtag the special focus. And you can also leave your comments below on our Facebook and YouTube live videos. Let me introduce you to our guests this evening. Firstly, we have Leanne Bank, who is an advisory director at BDO, and she's the head of the specialist tourism team at BDO as well. Welcome to the show, Leanne, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Zahid.
We also have Mr. Nwati Sonwabile Hnama, the tourism lecturer at the Tshwane University of Technology. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show. Mr. Nwati?
Always a pleasure and looking forward to a great, insightful engagement.
Indeed, it is a pleasure having both of you on the show this evening. We were also supposed to be joined by Mr.
I'm saying I'm looking forward to a great engagement with all of you.
Indeed. So as I was saying, we were also supposed to be joined by Mr. Chifewa Chifengwa, who is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. But I've just been notified that unfortunately, Mr. Chifengwa is unable to join us due to an urgent matter that he has to attend to. So let's begin with you, Ms. Leanne Bank. Ms. Leanne Back, rather. What has been the impact of COVID-19 responses implemented by the government, such as the lockdown? What has the impact been on the tourism industry in South Africa? We know that the rest of the world, much of the world, is currently going through the similar situation with the government responses having affected the tourism industries across the world. But tonight we are focusing particularly on tourism in a South African context. So what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the South African tourism industry?
Thanks, Zahid. But we all know that the travel and tourism sector has been the sector that has been the hardest hit by the down. Not only, I was saying, not only South Africa, and the impact is obviously overnight. Our borders were closed, which meant we have no foreign tourists coming into the country. It also meant that nobody could travel domestically. And when you think about our economy, where directly and indirectly 10% of our economy is the result of tourism. So all of a sudden, that 10% has just dried up. And of that, 56% of that 10% is because of the domestic market, and 44% is because of the international market. So B&Bs, so the entire value chain within tourism has been affected. So whether you're a travel agent dealing with the outbound market, in other words, selling to South Africans who are going overseas, their business is dried up, or if they're selling locally as well, their business just ground to a halt overnight. If you're a B&B in a township, in a suburban area, wherever you are, and you know the impact on the B&Bs and these small enterprises, of which our sector represents more than 95% of our sector constitutes SMMEs. So if you think about the impact, all these little businesses have just went from fairly successful businesses to nothing overnight, and obviously not much could prepare them for no revenue overnight. And the value chain is quite deep and quite long and quite broad. We have tour operators, we have trip operators, we've got people who drive vehicles, and obviously you all know about big hotels, but the big hotels are the obvious bit. It's the smaller ones as well that are obviously that everybody's feeling the pinch. I mean, everybody lost revenue, but some of the bigger ones, or not necessarily, some companies have had some cash flow to keep them going, but the majority haven't. And, you know, and this industry is also made up with a lot of people, the barriers to entry are quite low. So there's a lot of people in the industry who've entered the industry utilizing their life savings, and now they're sitting with an asset, or they're sitting with a business that's got no revenue. And the biggest uncertainty was not knowing when they could operate again. How long were they going to be with no revenue? And as we know, at lockdown level 3, there was a slight change, and where we had some business travel, but it was very, very small. It was a trickle. Lockdown level 3 also advanced, brought some interprovincial travel, and now we've got interprovincial travel so the leisure market can now travel. But it does mean, because up until now, we've been losing roughly 750 million rand a day in our economy because of the lockdown.
And of course, the lockdown having impacted on most businesses in the country, because at one stage it was just essential services that were allowed to operate. So I'm sure everyone is feeling the pinch of this lockdown. And one of the hardest hit sectors of the economy, of course, as you've just mentioned, is the tourism industry. And that's what we are actually talking about tonight. We are assessing the impact that COVID-19 has had on the tourism industry. Mr. Unati, just as Leanne Bank has told us, many businesses in the tourism industry having been successful and overnight just being reduced to nearly nothing. And the majority of the businesses, as she says, might not have been able to pull through this crisis that has unfolded. So it's quite a catastrophe here for the tourism industry, Mr. Hinama.
Wow, it's to say it's a catastrophe would be undermining the impact. This is bigger than September 11th, because when you speak in tourism, you speak about September 11th as the defining period of the tourism industry. The outbreak of COVID is the defining moment for the tourism industry in the whole world. Now, let's take it further. In the South African context, for the past 4 years, because our economy has not been growing at the right rate, domestic tourism has been declining. As a country, we have become much more dependent on regional tourists that come from Lesotho, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, to come into these border towns to buy food, services, and all of that. We have become dependent on international tourists to come to our country and sustain the tourism value chain, because the decline in domestic tourism is defined by 2 things. One, the declining economic conditions in our country. Number 2, the decrease in the number of people who are taxpayers. Now let's break that into 2. When we speak about decrease in taxpayers, for the past 4 or 5 years, ever since South Africa became a target of downgrade, a lot of South Africans, regardless of race, have been emigrating because opportunities outside of the country have been presenting themselves. So they've been leaving the country. So that
Yeah.
means that the number of domestic tourists that we have today compared to January would be very less, because even domestic residents, citizens of this country, are emigrating en masse. So that means that if we expect tourism to rebound, for us to expect domestic tourists to sustain the tourism value chain, it will not happen, because we are putting unprecedented demand on domestic tourism, which will not happen. Leanne will be very, very much aware. When we do research on second home tourism and all of that, we would see that the majority of what we term as visiting friends, relatives, dominates domestic tourism. And then when you look, you'll say, okay, domestic tourism is defined by trips from Gauteng and major industrial areas such as Durban, such as Cape Town, going to peripheral areas linked to the uh, 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 former industries of mining and the migrant labor system. But you also realize that for the past 10 years, mining has been declining as an economic sector. So now, if VFR, visiting friends, relatives, dominates tourism, domestic tourism, then today we expect it to become this Cinderella recovery. I believe we need to come to people who reflect differently on the tourism sector and engage, because I believe right now this is a time that requires round table discussion with people in industry sector such as BDO in tourism, with academics, and we can put all stakeholders together and say, when we speak about tourism recovery must be based on fact and not fiction.
Mhm. And just as Mr. Unati Sonwabile Hinaba is saying that a lot of the domestic tourism that has been taking place in South Africa is mostly to visit friends and family,
Zahid, was I
and
too long?
no, it was just right. Thank you for that contribution, actually. Much appreciated. So, just as we were saying now, Mr. Unati Sinwabile Hinaba was saying that a lot of the tourism that takes place within our borders here in South Africa is dependent on people who are visiting their friends and family. And my question to the listeners this evening in that regard is, do you feel safe to travel now that interprovincial travel is allowed
Zahid,
in Asia as well? So, for the listeners, do you feel safe to travel at this stage, although the pandemic has not yet ended? Do you feel safe to travel? The number you can send your answers to is 0617660355. That's on WhatsApp. And you can tweet and tag at Salam Media on Twitter. Don't forget to use the hashtag the special focus. Now, just to continue with this discussion, Leanne back, were the measures that government had implemented, were these measures acceptable, or were they a little too tight, considering that facilities such as Airbnb weren't allowed to operate until just a short while ago, despite major hotel chains having been allowed to operate with certain restrictions, of course. But the Airbnb facilities, for example, are not being allowed to operate for quite some time.
Oh, I think am I back? Sorry, I lost signal there for a bit. Yeah, I really do think that the industry worked very hard during lockdown to make sure that they had adequate protocols, not only adequate, world-class protocols in place to make sure that travelers would be safe when they entered facilities within.
Muslian back. Okay, we seem to be having some trouble connecting with Muslian back. But just if you could take that question over, Mr. Unati. We're speaking about the measures that were put in place to curb the spread of the coronavirus, especially during the lockdown. And as things eased out, some measures were they too tight a little? Considering that facilities such as Airbnb weren't allowed to operate until just a short while ago, despite major hotel chains having been allowed to operate with restrictions. Mr. Unati? Okay, I see a message from the technical team. We seem to have lost both our guests for this evening. Let's take a quick ad break, and when we get back, as soon as we get our guests back on the line, we will continue with this discussion. Please do stay tuned.
Years of experience, IG Hussein and Company are renowned for their quality Islamic wear and goods. IG Hussein and Company stock a variety of Islamic items, musallas, kitabs, Medina dates, perfumes and exclusive gifts. We guarantee you a unique and friendly shopping experience for the entire family. Visit our new branch in Overport at 202 Kenilworth Park, Brickfield Road. Open 7 days a week with ample parking and wheelchair friendly. Like us on Facebook or Instagram at IG Hussein for our latest promotions and updates. IG Hussein and Company, your Islamic lifestyle.
Dad, well, I've been chatting with an investment broker today and...
Broker? Did the broker tell you that our economy is a mess? There's bushfires in Australia, America wanted World War III, and now the coronavirus is traveling around the world.
Well, I also thought about purchasing some crypto.
Crypto? What's that, like another pyramid scheme? I don't trust what I can't see.
There's an apartment in Belito.
So whole your family will be asking to stay there for free. And what if the government takes it away, eh?
Dad, I don't think it works like that.
I'll tell you what works. Gold. At your age, I invested in gold coins and it paid for your university fees and your wedding. No contracts, no agreements. Your investment is in your hands and you own it. With a 70% growth in only 5 years, do you still doubt gold investment? Contact RJ Coin today, 031 202 4701, or visit them at 151 Stephen Lamini Road in Musgrave, Durban. Randery Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange, your passport to gold investment.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Welcome back. You are tuned into the Special Focus. My name is Zahid Jadwat, and we are together until 8 p.m. tonight right here on Salam Media. Of course, via our live stream on salammedia.com/listen-live, on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube page. And we are also coming to you live on our Twitter page as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, just before the ad break, we were speaking about the tourism industry and how COVID-19 has impacted on this particular industry. Of course, our guest, Mr. Unati Sonwabile Hinaba, actually a lecturer at the Chole University of Technology, having told us that it would not be it's much more than a catastrophe for the industry. Of course, billions having been lost and around 400,000 people should lose their job as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic, just in South Africa alone. Because remember, this isn't just a South African problem. This has been affecting the tourism industries across the globe, and unfortunately many people will lose their jobs as a result of the restrictions that have been in place. So we now have Mr. Unati Sonwabile Hinaba, who has joined us from the Tshwane University of Technology. He's a tourism lecturer there. We were having some difficulty connecting with both our guests, but I see both of them have now joined us once again. Thank you both for joining us. To pick up from where we left off just before the ad break and when we lost both of you, we were speaking about the restrictions that were in place on the tourism industry, and the tourism industry by far having been affected probably the most by the restrictions and the lockdown. Ms. Leon, just coming back to the question that I had posed to you before we lost you. Do you think these restrictions were they justifiable to have been placed on the tourism industry? And of course, I mentioned one of the restrictions which was until recently, until we moved down to level 2 of the lockdown, was that Airbnb facilities were not allowed to operate, whilst other facilities such as major hotel chains were allowed to operate. So, what do you make of the measures that were in place on the tourism industry?
So, as I was saying, that globally, irrespective of what restrictions we put in place in this country or not, foreign tourists wouldn't be coming here. And that's because of advisories coming from their countries, basically saying don't travel to South Africa or don't travel to areas with high COVID infection rates. So we would be crossed off the list immediately. So whether we had closed our borders or not wouldn't have made a difference. The flights wouldn't be coming, and the foreign tourists wouldn't be coming here. The question then to ask really is, was it necessary then to lock down for domestic tourism point of view? And the initial lockdown, that was a flattening of the curve approach. It wasn't necessarily about infection control. It was control for a time, but it was about flattening the curve. And obviously the biggest issue with the travel and tourism sector and with hospitality is the fact that people get together and they gather. And that was why government saw it as such a big risk, which is understandable, but because people get together, friends get together, family get together, groups get together that don't normally live together. And this is where a big risk is going to happen in terms of the transfer of the virus. Conferencing and exhibitions as well, obviously strange people all getting together, concerts, it's all understandable why we were prescribed in terms of the fact that these facilities could not operate, and some of them still can't operate. When they started reducing some of the restrictions, and at level 3, there was said, okay, hotels can open, but as you mentioned, Airbnb products can't open. And that to me was a bit of a challenge, because the industry, as I was saying before, we've lost connectivity. The industry put a lot of effort into develop really world-class protocols. I'm not talking about just sort of touchy-feely type protocols. I mean, really world-class protocols for how to handle guests right throughout the entire value chain of the tourism sector. So as you get into your vehicle, if you're hiring a car, if you're getting into a taxi of some sort, if you're getting into a bus, in the hotels, and the protocols are all aimed at obviously making sure that the virus is not transferred between guests and between staff and guests, vice versa, or which way around, and making sure that guests stay at any particular place is as safe as possible. Airbnb also did the same thing, and the industry as a whole adopted those protocols, and they put a lot of effort into making sure, and it cost a lot of money, obviously, to make sure that systems and processes are in place to make sure that guests are safe, because no hotel or Airbnb or one wants to know that the guests got the virus from being at their facility. So did I think it was unfair to single out Airbnb? Absolutely.
And that
Sorry. Yeah, so let me just get a drink of water.
So that exactly my question about the measures that were in place, especially about Airbnb facilities. And I think you feel that it might not have been fair on Airbnb facilities to have been singled out when major hotel chains were opened up. But you also speak about opening borders, and when we open these borders, most countries would not like to actually send their people. They wouldn't advise their citizens to travel to South Africa, because at this current moment, in fact, we are sitting at 5th in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases in total in the world. So that's quite a high rate of infection at this time, and I don't think many countries would advise their citizens to travel to South Africa. But so I think the message there is that we need to now boost our domestic tourism as well, because we cannot really depend much on international tourism, because as you said, the advice that many countries would issue is that their citizens can't come to South Africa. So, Mr. Unathi Sonwabile, just over to you now about this. I hope you've heard most of it, because you seem to have lost connectivity for quite some time. So we are speaking about opening borders and the advice that countries would issue to their citizens, of course, to travel to South Africa, whether they would advise or not. And it seems we need to boost our domestic tourism, but at the same time, as you mentioned earlier on, Mr. Unati, the local economic conditions here in South Africa, we know too well, are not
Mhm.
favorable for domestic tourism. Many people would like to travel at this stage. Unfortunately, they can't because of the economic situation. So that's a bit of tough one, Mr. Unati. Mr. Unati?
I think he's frozen.
Okay, I think Mr. Unati Sunwabile is having quite a difficult time
Okay.
connecting with us this evening, but I'm sure you've heard what we've just said, and so maybe you'd like to take over.
Yeah. So I'll pick some. There's a couple of things I just want to say. So what you talked when you spoke about the infection rates, and you
I
mentioned
believe opening of the
that we've written
borders
more. Oh, okay.
is
Sorry.
important, necessary, and something we should not be think. Because the tourism industry is based on the principles of how tourists come from overseas. They come to our country, spend their hard-earned money here, and we regard their expenditure as exports. The vast majority of countries that tourists attract tourists to benefit from foreign exchange. So I agree with Leanne that we need to open the borders. But when you open the borders, it has to be done appropriately. For example, I have suggested to say, government, in September, give us a date. For argument's sake, let's say 15th of September, you say, we are going to level 1, 15th of September. When you immediately do that, you create certainty. Travel agencies, tour operators can now put South Africa on the buy list. Why that is so important is because people still want to travel even during lockdown. If you look at Europe, Europeans are traveling, even though they were one of the worst hit continents in terms of COVID. What you must understand, esteemed Zahid, is that tourism is a highly, highly competitive industry. And
Yeah.
we as Africans, we get money from these wealthy tourists from the West. That means Europe, that means America. They come to our country and come and spend so much money. Now, European countries do not want us to get that money. If you look at tourism stats, Africa still gets less than 10% of international tourism receipts. That means that in as much as the number of tourists we get is low in number, but the benefit
Mr. Unati? Okay, that really does not seem like a good connection at this moment, but we'll try to work. I'm sure the technical team is working on that connection. So, Ms. Leanne back, thank you for joining us once again, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So, has there been any impact that might just be positive in hindsight? We've been speaking about the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism industry. It's quite a big sector in the economy, and unfortunately, a lot of it has been lost due to the pandemic. But in hindsight, do you think there's any positive, something positive that we can take out from this pandemic?
Well, I mean, when you talk about cataclysmic, I mean, this really is cataclysmic because I mean we are losing jobs left, right, and centre. We heard yesterday about STA travel closing down, being liquidated, and all the staff being without jobs. And that's just, I mean, we don't hear about a lot of the businesses that are closing down, but people are losing their jobs left, right, and centre in this industry. So it's difficult to say, are there any positives? And it's difficult to talk through positives when people are without jobs. But there are opportunities. I wouldn't say, I mean, so there are opportunities. And there are opportunities to almost, what I would say, reset our industry. As Unati was talking about, he was talking about the reliance that we have on the foreign tourist dollar, if you want to call it. So we have 10.2, last year we had 10.2 million foreign tourists, but only 2.5 million of those were actually high spenders. The majority of them were actually cross-border travelers and African travelers who are not necessarily high spenders, I should say. So the 2.5 million were what we call African air arrivals, who are big spenders, as well as visitors from the East and from the West, USA, obviously Europe, and the Eastern countries. And they spend a lot of money in our country. And obviously the great thing about it is export. We're bringing foreign currency into the country, so which is great for our balance of payments. But we have, as an industry, put too much reliance on these high net worth people, these people that bring the dollar into our country. And we've ignored our domestic tourism market. Not ignored, but we've downplayed it. And we haven't developed products that cater to the width and breadth of our society. So a lot of South Africans don't feel welcome in the tourism products that we have, because they don't cater for South Africans. They cater for foreign tourists, or they cater for high net worth individuals, South Africans. So we need to think, and I do believe there's an opportunity here. I think there's a realization that the worst possible scenario has happened here. Our foreign tourism, I mean, nobody dreamt about this in our risk assessments for the industry, that we would have no more foreign tourists, that we would have foreign tourism would just dry up. And we need to recognize that we need to look to domestic tourism first. And this is not only a South African issue, it's an African issue. Africa has focused too much on the foreign market and hasn't focused on developing domestic tourism and regional tourism, so providing products for African tourists, not just South African tourists. So we need product that is more affordable. We need product that allows for, I call it, more gregarious social type of environments, different type of product, different type of foods, and it's the affordability is quite key, as opposed to charging in US dollars. And so this, I believe, to me, I really do believe that there's an opportunity for those who are willing to tap into the South African market. I understand that we've lost a lot of jobs in our economy. The extent of the disposable income that we've got in our economy is reduced significantly. So the money that people have to travel is reduced hugely. But it doesn't mean that people don't still want to travel, and the need to travel is there. And what we need to do, as Unati was talking about, the VFR travelers, the visiting friends and relatives, opportunities to convert those travelers to one. And when you go home to visit Gogo, take Gogo to go and visit a particular resort within your area. You don't have to go far, but provide a facility that allows them to celebrate with their families and relax with their families. Also learning experiences around that. And if you actually look towards, there's in the UK, after World War II, the UK put together as a group of resorts called Butlins that were aimed particularly at lifting the morale of the British public. So they encouraged people to actually start taking holidays. They were affordable resorts aimed at the majority of the UK population and encouraging to travel to improve the morale levels within the country, to get people excited again, because like you can imagine, they were also decimated after being involved in World War II. And we need to do something similar in this country. We need to start stimulating travel amongst the average South Africans. People that don't necessarily have a lot of money, but they do have money. They do have some money, and they can travel. They might not be able to travel far, but they can travel somewhere. And so this is, yeah, so I see that as an opportunity.
And just if I could go deeper into this discussion about tapping into the domestic market of tourism here in South Africa, do you really believe that we can actually make tourism more affordable for the domestic market here in South Africa. As you mentioned, many people who might want to travel cannot really afford to travel. Can we really cater for these people? Is there any space for them?
Yes, we can. I really do believe we can. We don't have to have fancy taps and fancy equipment and fancy objects and paintings and things like that on the wall. And you can also offer a more compartmentalized, so self-catering facilities obviously go a long way, where you can actually bring your own food and you don't have to buy food at the establishment. And where you have multiple beds and units, as opposed to singular plush 5-star types of facilities. Budget, I must just an affordable. You don't have to. Doesn't have to be nasty. Doesn't have to be cheap and nasty. You can do affordable, but basic. And if you want extras, you can pay for extras. And that is there's a lot of countries that's how they operate. I don't know if you travel around many Scandinavian countries. If you book a room for the night, people bring their own linen. If you want linen, you pay extra. They don't clean the rooms every day. So you might be staying at a resort, but nobody comes and cleans the rooms for you every day. You actually clean them yourself, and they clean it. You're actually supposed to clean it before the next guest arrives as well. So there's all these sort of modularities that you can build in place in terms of to make things more affordable.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see how we adapt to the situation that has now come as a result of COVID-19. Of course, many lessons to be learned, and we'll speak about the lessons later on in this discussion. We have about 20 minutes remaining, and we will go into that just now. So I like this idea of affordable but basic accommodation that should be available to the domestic market. It's something I would really like to see a rollout in South Africa. But now the Department of Tourism has released a draft tourism recovery plan, and that includes 3 phases, which is to protect domestic tourism businesses, managing the reopening of the industry, and driving long-term growth. So, Ms. Leonberg, are you confident that this is the correct approach for the industry's recovery?
We don't have much of a choice. And that it is the way we need to go. But I strongly do believe that the best way for us to recover is to consult and communicate and collaborate. And we started to see that happen. So the industry needs to collaborate more. People need to work together, share more, learn from each other, consult with each other, and communicate. Communicate is quite important. And when communication is not just about talking, it's about hearing as well. I do think us as an industry, we might be good at talking. We're not necessarily that good at listening. And so, yeah, so I mean, we need to make sure that we that we thrive going forward as an industry. And it will take time. It will take time to recover, but we can do it. Will the industry look different going forward? It is likely, because we're going to be losing a lot of businesses. And will there be changes in the value chain? It is possible as well, that there will be changes in the value chain, and in the way the industry operates. But change is, I suppose, as we say, is the only constant, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And of course, we do live in interesting times to now be able to see how things will evolve as we move forward, of course, after the pandemic. But we are in conversation with Ms. Leanne Back, who is the advisory director at BDO. And she's also the head of the Specialist Tourism Board at BDO. But let's take a quick ad break, and when we get back, we will continue this discussion. In fact, we will begin wrapping up this discussion. So please do stay tuned.
Salam Media, a global voice for humanity.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. trade in or remodel your old gold, clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Nature's Blends Black Seed, Kalonji, Sunnah and Hadith Benefit Remedy. Nature's Blends has a variety of natural products to help you take control of your life. Key ingredients being black seed oil, cod liver oil, glucosamine, turmeric, black seed and Yemeni cedar honey. Add this to your favorite foods or mix with cedar honey to improve health. Black seed has a lot of benefits. Just to mention a few, it's antibacterial, anti-ulcer, anti-inflammatory, and pain-killing, etc. For more information or to order, contact Shakir Kassem on 082 777 8696 or email shakir222@icloud.com or follow at Shakir_ABC on Instagram for all your Sunnah remedy needs. Nature's Blends, bringing nature's finest.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back. You are tuned into the special focus on Salam Media. I am Zahid Jadwat, and this evening we are discussing the COVID-19 impact on tourism, of course, as restrictions are eased, and now it's time for the tourism industry to now count the costs of the pandemic. And I think what we have learned as this discussion progressed since 7 p.m. this evening, there has been quite a bit of damage that has occurred in this in the tourism industry in South Africa, and a few interesting points mentioned by the guests as well. Of course, Ms. Lee and Beck having spoken about the domestic tourism market as well, how we should actually tap into that market as well. So let me just recap our guests. Firstly, we have Ms. Lee Ann Beck, who is an advisory director at BDO, and she's the head of the specialist tourism team at BDO. On the line telephonically, we also have Mr. Unati Sunwabile Hinama, who is the tourism lecturer at the Tshwane University of Technology. Let me just confirm if we have him on the line. Yes, we do have Mr. Unati. Let's just hope that this line is good enough to have him throughout the show for the rest of the show, because we are together until 7 p.m. Of course, as the listener, you can actually send us your comments. The WhatsApp number is 0617660355. Tweet and tag at Salam Media using the hashtag special focus. Alternatively, you can drop a comment below in our YouTube and Facebook live videos. Now, Mr. Unati Sunwabile, thank you so much for joining us once again. Estimates suggest that around 28% of South African accommodation providers may not survive the COVID-19 crisis, and that means around 400,000 people may lose their jobs in the tourism industry alone. So this despite many measures having been put in place by the Department of Tourism, by government, these relief measures having been put in place. So where do you think these measures may have fallen short, Mr.
I
Unati?
think that, yes, I think yes, I'm connected now. I think the first thing we must understand is that South Africa is like Mauritius, it's like Seychelles. We depend more on international tourists to come to our country to sleep in our hotels. If you look at our stats, the vast majority of people that come to South Africa come here for shopping, healthcare, education. They've got family here. They come, they don't stay at your traditional hotel. They don't go at your traditional restaurant. You see what I'm saying? So the people we require, people who can come and spend money within the tourism village chain. And some of them might not actually come from SADC. They might come from international markets. That's why we, as a tourism body, we are lobbying, say, open the borders. Because if you don't open the borders, there are so many tourism operators in South Africa that only cater for international tourists. and they will die.
Mm.
Let's go back to Airbnb. Airbnb has
Yeah.
never been allowed to operate. But when government said sharing platforms such as Airbnb are illegal, then I asked myself, government, do you have the capacity to manage Airbnb? Do you have the legislative mandate to manage Airbnb? Because the act that's supposed to manage Airbnb is not even passed in Parliament. You cannot therefore create regulations under the Disaster Management Act that have not passed scrutiny of Parliament to say we don't want Airbnb. You see what I'm saying? So I've always been advising and lobbying government to say, government, look at how you conduct yourself, because you are unable to police Airbnb. You cannot just wake up and say, as government, nobody wants to be Airbnb. But the question is, are you able to police it? It's impossible. So, because if government takes decisions that we cannot police, it indicates another issue, eroding the significance of government as a stakeholder in our relations. But speaking about retrenchment in the tourism industry, it's certain. Remember, when COVID occurred, it occurred in early January. The tourism industry was in peak season in January. And all of us, we all thought that 2-3 months this would be over. This has gone on for longer than all of us thought. What I'm basically trying to say is that restaurants, eateries, bed and breakfast, they were unable to operate the whole year. For you to expect them to operate again, impossible. Because demand is not there. And when you say open the borders, we're trying to say bring demand from overseas. Let's save people's jobs. Because remember, in as much as we call COVID a pandemic, poverty, unemployment, inequality, lack of health, all of those are pandemics we've been unable to destroy. The biggest challenge we have is hunger in South Africa. And even the poorest of the poor will tell you that I am not scared of COVID because poverty is what faces you every day. So these hotels are closed down, these restaurants are closed down. We hire those that can't get work in any other industry, because when they come to our industry, we give them on-the-job training. And on-the-job training empowers them for them to be able to do a vertical situation in promotion at work and all of those things. So they become experts. Now, when mining was shedding jobs, we were creating jobs. When agriculture was shedding jobs, we were creating jobs. Now it's our turn. What does that mean? The entire South African economy is in a state of no return. We will never recover as a country, because as I see things, because government, when we say to them open borders, they don't understand. They think tourism is entertainment. No, tourism is a major job creator. When a town grows and tourism comes, people who have houses, who in Gauteng would buy houses in Dalstrom, will buy houses in Hartbeespoort. The construction industry benefits. So tourism is what we call a catalyzer of other sectors. Right.
Yeah. All right. So I think we need to open the borders, as you say, because we do depend on these international arrivals and international tourists. But at the same time, as we mentioned earlier on in this discussion, as Ms. Leanne Back had mentioned, many countries would not be willing to send their citizens to South Africa, considering the high number of COVID-19 cases in South Africa, because we must also remember that at this stage, we haven't passed the pandemic. It has not ended as yet. And then Ms. Leanne Back, as Mr. Onachi was speaking just now, he says we have reached a point of no return. So are you confident, Ms. Leanne Back, that it is possible to revive the tourism industry back to its pre-pandemic levels? And if so, what would such a recovery effort need to entail? That question also, I would like to get your perspective on that, Mr. Unati. But before you, let's just get some perspective from Ms. Leanne back.
So can we revive the sector? Absolutely. Absolutely. So the advantage is, and tourism as an industry is hugely resilient. We've seen it rebound after 9/11. We've seen it rebound after the financial crisis. Yes, this is experience before, but the need to travel is inherent in everybody, just about. The desire to travel is huge, which is great. I do believe that we are going to see an issue where countries are going to be looking after themselves first initially. So it's going to be a focus on recovering domestic tourism. So our key source markets, as I mentioned, the countries, not only will there'll be travel advisory about not traveling to countries that have got high infection rates, people in those countries will be looking to travel domestically first before traveling internationally. Sorry. Tickle in my throat.
We do hope that you are well. Of course, what would go through our mind in this thing? Okay.
No COVID.
Okay.
I just got this tickle. Anyway.
Yeah.
So hence the need to rely on domestic tourism. And then not only domestic tourism, but regional tourism as well. So tourists from elsewhere in Africa. And I think there's massive potential to develop what I would call authentic or real African tourists who come here to partake in our tourism experience and don't just come here to shop, which is still very important for our economy, but we want them to stay in our hotels, partake in our activities, go look at our wildflowers, go see our game, enjoy our beaches, and spend money in our economy. And there is potential. So I am confident that the industry will recover. Will it look different? I do believe it will look different, but we will get back to the sort of pre-COVID levels. Will it take time? Absolutely. It will take a couple of years before we get back to 2019 levels, which in all wasn't a great shakes of a year for us in terms of the tourism industry, but we will get back there eventually, and it will take a couple of years. So I'm not as pessimistic as my learned colleague Unati. Yeah, I'm fairly optimistic. And you posed a question earlier about have the relief measures that government has put in place, have they been sufficient? I mean, the short answer, of course, is no. The long answer is we're a country in dire economic constraints and we having some relief for the tourism industry and for not for the whole industry, just for components of the tourism industry, has certainly been better than no relief. And most of the tourism industry in other African countries have received zero relief. So yes, compared to the relief that the tourism industry received in Europe, our government did quite poorly compared to what other African countries are doing or have done. Our country has done very well. So the TERS, the fact that we had that the TERS payment for the tourism industry was a huge relief to many businesses and were able to keep jobs going. Unfortunately, that's come to an end now. As of the 15th of August, the last was for the last payment. Were there complexities? Were there problems about getting the money paid? Absolutely, there were challenges. We know about the fact that the Department of Tourism had 200 million rand that they distributed to, I think it was 4,000 tourism businesses. They each got 50,000 rand. So yes, it was better than nothing for those 4,000 businesses. Help them to pay their electricity bill for a month or two, and to help them to pay for a few wages. But there were a lot of businesses that obviously didn't benefit and that didn't comply. But it's we're a financially constrained country, and there was limited funds available to actually support the tourism industry. So yeah, so sort of like once again, I'm sort of weighing up the sort of the challenges that the ministry, the tourism ministry, has had to face, and our government has had to face, and that what they're trying to balance between, as they keep on talking about, between lives and livelihoods.
Mr. Onati Sunwabile Hinaba, just perhaps any second thoughts on your outlook for the industry? Of course, Ms. Leanne Back having been quite optimistic, saying that the tourism industry is quite resilient. Do you necessarily agree with this, Mr. Onati?
I believe the tourism industry, by its character, is very resilient, but we are facing unprecedented times. It is not that one is pessimistic, because I think me and Leanne Beck are one of the most optimistic people of all time. But I believe that if we don't open the borders, we are creating an unrealistic expectation of domestic tourism. And if we do that, then domestic tourism will not succeed, because we need borders to be open for people to come for shopping.
Mr. Onati?
Dubai was the first country.
Yeah, okay, we can hear you.
Yes, I mean, Dubai was one of the first countries to open its borders, because they said you must create confidence within the market, create confidence for people about your destination. Kenya opened its borders. So if we are the last one to open our borders, we will lose October, November, December, and then the tourism industry in South Africa will never be able to recover. It will be dead forever, because it will not be able to be sustained. And when tourism does not succeed, agriculture doesn't operate, because imagine how many eggs we eat and consume within the tourism value chain. Right.
Yeah, so I think it will be interesting to see how all of this pans out. And unfortunately, we just have about 3 minutes remaining to the end of the show at now 57 minutes past 7 p.m. Central African time. So just quickly, if we could begin to wrap up, your final thoughts, Ms. Leanne Back. Maybe you might want to wrap up on what you would see in a post-COVID-19 tourism environment.
Post-COVID-19, our industry's changed forever. Yes, social distancing and online conferencing is definitely probably here to stay. Wearing of masks is going to become more commonplace. So we're going to see it more often. We're going to have a change. Our eventing industry is going to look quite different. And our, but they're going to happen. And I'm still confident that we will get back to where we were. I am confident that, but obviously what we need to get back to where we were is a vaccine. Until there is a vaccine in place, unfortunately, we're not going to move that fast, and we're not going to move that far. So that's what needed. That's what's needed to get us back on track.
Yeah, just that we should remember that the pandemic hasn't yet ended, so this is going to be with us for quite some time. And yeah, so we haven't quite reached the end as yet. But just your final thoughts, Mr. Onati Sunwabile.
Open the borders. That's my final thought.
Okay. Yeah, so that will be interesting, because I actually have been conversing with a few people in my circles. One of my friends from Lisbon himself has come from there all the way to Mozambique, and so yeah, I think many countries are opening their borders, and it's just a matter of time until South Africa does the same. But then, as Ms. Leanne Back has stressed over and over again, as we've stressed in this conversation, how many countries are willing to let their people come to South Africa? So I think that's the question that's going to remain for quite some time, and we'll just have to see how it goes from now on. Of course, many people depending on the tourism industry, and of course, it's quite sad to hear that about 400,000 people, as we mentioned earlier on, will be losing their jobs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But thank you so much for your time to both of you this evening, Mr. Unati Sunubile Hinama, a tourism lecturer at the Zone University of Technology, and Ms. Lee Ann Back, who is, in fact, an advisory director at BDO and the head of the specialist tourism team at BDO. Thank you so much for your time to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Always a pleasure.
And at exactly 8 p.m. on the dot Central African time, that's where we are going to have to leave it. Thank you so much for tuning into the special focus this evening, just as you do every week. Remember that you can catch us next week, same time, same place, right here on Salam Media. From myself, Zahid, Jadwat, and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.